Alright guys, now that we have this $300 PC all booted up and ready to go, let's dive into a couple benchmarks real quick. Now we decided to test this PC in a couple of titles, those being Apex Legends, Fortnite, and Call of Duty Vanguard. Now first up in Apex Legends, at 1080p on very low settings, we averaged about 60 FPS. In this game, the RX 460 is the bottleneck, and we do get very similar results to the $400 PC we built on the channel with an RX 460 and Ryzen 3 1200, but that's not a bad thing. We get a very solid 60 FPS, and I'm still very impressed with how solid the frame rate is. It's not stuttery, it's not laggy, it's not having sharp dips below 60, it's staying rock solid around 60 FPS, and it makes for a really playable gaming experience in a game like Apex Legends that relies really well on having very solid frame rates, because if you have a big dip, you're probably going to die in a game like Apex Legends. Next up in Fortnite on performance mode, which is our favorite esports game, at 1080p, we averaged about 100 FPS. This is where we start to see the limitations of the 4th gen Intel architecture compared to something like a Ryzen 3 1200, which is slightly newer. That $400 PC is going to have a little bit of an edge in terms of FPS here, but still getting over 100 FPS in Fortnite is incredibly playable. And the same would go in games like Valorant, Rocket League, CSGO. All the other esports titles will get very similar 100 plus FPS experience, and that RX 460 is more than adequate to do that. Now, where the system starts to suffer a little bit is in higher end games like Call of Duty Vanguard, where we have to drop down to 1600 by 900 on very low settings to get about a 50 to 60 FPS average. It's not a great experience. There definitely are some stutters and dips here, but Call of Duty Vanguard is a brand new game, and we are gaming on a pretty older system using the RX 460. But I do believe the $400 PC has an advantage in these titles, and it just depends on what map you're playing on in Call of Duty Vanguard and how demanding it actually is. If you're okay with playing on 720p and playing at very low settings, you would get away with pretty much any game you throw at this system, but that is a compromise you'll have to make. But when you're talking about a $300 PC in 2021, I mean, you really can't complain too much. It's super easy to upgrade, it's ready out the gate, and the specs are still very impressive. Now, of course, in like 2019, you could build something way better with like an RX 580 or 570, but we live in 2021, so it's really not worth, thinking about the past here. Let's think about what we can actually do now, and this RX 460 combo is actually pretty good for the money. So if you guys want to pick anything up from today's video, a link's in the description down below, and yeah, that pretty much wraps up the benchmark section in today's video. I'm going to bring Jackson back in here to wrap this video up real quick.